Teachers of Reddit, who is one standout student that you'll remember for a very long time? I teach first. I have a student with high anxiety if I'm not there. I had a funeral for my grandpa. So I front loaded him with something like my grandpa went to heaven so I won't be here tomorrow. So and so will be the sub. He said okay. Walked away. Then came back a few minutes later and hugged me and said I'm sorry about your grandpa. You don't see much empathy from 6-year-olds. I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. Knowing anxiety. That kid thought about it for a long time. Then worked up the courage to do something. So the fact that they even did that makes it so much better. My first year working in education. There was one kid that was super creative. He could turn anything into a game. He made a game with dominoes one time that I couldn't for the life of me beat. And I was seriously trying. He later confided in me that his ex-stepfather had hit his mom and been to jail several times. It broke my heart because he and his siblings were the sweetest kids. He said to me once, "I think we're all teachers," and that quote still rings true. 7 years later. Not necessarily a standout for positive reasons, but I once had a student arrested in the middle of class for robbing 3 separate banks across state lines. I'll certainly never forget that. That's actually impressive. The kid that brought dry ice to school. Wrote "duck you" on the wall with his own sheet. Put kid soap sculptures into the microwave in the teacher's lounge. Downloaded porn on a school computer. Humped a dodgeball multiple times. Laid under his desk and humped the ground. Called from the classroom phone to order pizza. And whose father emailed me 3 times a day. Every day. For the entire year, all while CCing the superintendent on every email. That was a great year. That kid's going places. Not the kind of places you might want to visit though. I teach 8th grade. Last year, we lost one of our students in an accident right before fall break. From day one, he had been my favorite student. He was unbelievably kind and intelligent. Literally every single student had only positive things to say about him. I know that's typically how it goes when someone passes. But it wasn't like that with him. He was just one of those people you couldn't help but love. He was someone who would go out of his way to help those around him. And he brought out the best in his peers. A born leader. Then we lost him. I floundered for the rest of the year. I never felt like I completely regained my footing. I'm thankful for the time I had with him in my class. But I'm terrified of having to go through that again. Am married to a teacher. One kid decided to share for news that his family had burned their restaurant to the ground on the weekend to claim the insurance money. Snitch. I worked in a remote community in Australia. We don't usually get highly motivated kids. As they have their own problems in life, they don't eat every day and usually only get a couple of hours of sleep a night, but this boy was incredibly happy to be at school. Loved his art and was incredibly intelligent for his age in a range of subjects. To put this into perspective, most kids we deal with at the age of 13 have the same education level as 4-5-year-olds. Anyway, he and his family were driving on unsealed roads where the drunk father rolled the car going over 120 km/h, not uncommon. Everyone else was okay. But he was sitting on his mum's lap without a seatbelt. He was thrown out of the car and rolled on. Was very sad because he was by far the smartest student we have ever had and one of the few who had aspirations other than being a drug dealer or doing nothing with their life. He wanted to be a doctor to help people like his grandma who was on constant dialysis. We had roughly 8 out of over 300 students pass year 12, so this is something we celebrated when he said this. He could have done it too. I had an international female student who started a family in an English-speaking country with a male from her home country. She was becoming Americanized. To her husband's dismay. So he kidnapped the baby back to his home country. For complicated reasons. The woman could not simply go back to her home country without disastrous consequences. The whole saga was absolutely heartbreaking. I have no idea how it turned out. I had one super sassy student who would always grimace when asked a question and give minimal effort in anything related to class. One day our school had a Halloween party and I was helping with a magic show when she ran up to me with her friend and said, "This is my favorite teacher," to her friend. She was smiling so much and so happy. And from that day on she was a brilliant kid showing her true potential. Always high five everyone in your class and make them blossom, fellow teachers. That always blows me away. When you have a kid that you don't butt heads with, or like become super close with, and then on the last day of school, they blurt out, "You're my favorite teacher." You never really know the impact you have on others. I'm the student here. But I recently saw a teacher of mine from high school and she still has an extra credit answer I drew for the last final I took for her. It was one of those joke extra credit questions where she asked something about Carthage and Rome. And I basically wrote an essay, complete with maps. She gave me double extra credit points but I still failed the test. And her class. But I was still one of her favorite students. And she kept it. Taught high school theater and discovered a notebook that was being passed around mentioning a lot of high school drinking. So, one night instead of rehearsal, we staged an intervention with the cast of the show. We kept things very vague. Let the kids know we cared about them and talked to them frankly about some of our own experiences with addiction and depression. At the end of it, one student, someone who was not even mentioned in the notebook and I would have never suspected any of the things we talked about applied to him, pulled me aside and said, "I don't know how you guys figured it out. But yeah, I've been cutting. And I really appreciate you not calling me out in there." He got help soon thereafter. And is living a healthy life to this day. One of my former students just ran into a burning house the other day to save a family with no thought to his own safety. So, he is on my mind right now. It is hard to really pin down because there have been so many. I had one kid who is going to college and getting into politics. And he should. He took on a superintendent. And won. For the good of all his peers. Pretty awesome. Not in the news. But pretty awesome. I think I will always remember him. Update, for those of you interested. The story of Irako's Boris, he is still living. My former. I meant. He graduated. The first one who died tragically young after graduation. He reminded me of my oldest son. And was the most genuine and kind young man. He wasn't an especially good student. Just a wonderful person. One boy from when I was a student intern in a kindergarten classroom stands out above all others. He had been violent previously and had been sent to a mental facility and was being phased back into the public school system on the second week that I was in the classroom. So not only was I new to teaching, still getting to know the students and the school workings, but now I had a 5 years old with a history of violence that must have been bad enough to have been removed from the school already once before. His first day back, he arrived before I got to the classroom. When I entered the room, he had already destroyed all of the desks, 25 of them. Had thrown them all around the room and piled them atop one another. As I entered, he was taking the class pet bird out of the cage and ripped the head off right in front of me. Some other students saw him and started yelling and crying. And the regular classroom teacher came running in and grabbed him and he was trying to run toward the other kids with the bloody bird pieces. I was trying to get the principal and counselor to the classroom. It was horrible. He was removed again. And in the remaining 8 weeks I was there, I never saw him again. Never did find out what happened to him. This was when I taught first grade. I had a student who would be perfectly happy and normal. Out of the blue he would flip a switch. He would look down or away. And then look back at you with this stare. It was like he could see in your soul. It was terrifying. He would throw things. Like desks. Try to stab people with stuff. His parents thought starting fires and hurting the neighborhood pets was a phase. Luckily he was only in my room a few weeks before he was put into a special program. 2 kids in 1 week stuck their tongues on a flagpole, exactly like Christmas Story, and another on a basketball standard. During -15-degree weather, one kid left a bloody chunk of tongue on the basketball standard. Another super nice high school kid would always say thank you after class. As in, thank you for teaching us. Full stop. I subbed last year at a special education where there was a student that was 6 feet 8 inches and 350 pounds. He punched me square in the chest as hard as he could when he couldn't get seconds in lunch. Won't be forgetting that one anytime soon. In my current position though, I don't think there is a single student I will forget. I am a trained music teacher, but my school needed a kindergarten teacher for the year, so this is my first and probably last year doing this. It's been a very interesting and rewarding job, but also incredibly challenging with every student requiring such different levels of attention. I am actually a teacher. The students that stand out the most are not the ones that are the smartest, or the highest scoring, or the best behaving, or the worst behaving. The ones that stand out are the ones that are unique, that march to the beat of their own drum, that bring something new to your class that you haven't seen before in X years in the classroom. He was an amazing young boy. He could use complex differential and integral equations at the age of 15. He also had an amazing mustache. His name? Albert Einstein. A student once asked me what his sister was like when she was in high school. We had been in the same year throughout high school and then went to the same college for a bit. So I knew her pretty well, even though we weren't exactly friends. Great girl. Everyone loved her. She had this way of making you smile no matter how sad you felt. So I'm like, well, what is she up to these days? She must have recognized my name if you know we went to school together. Well, turns out she committed suicide a few months after our last semester together. Her brother was 9 at the time, and was now in my class 7 years later. He recognized me from her yearbook pictures, and just wanted to learn more about his sister from someone who got to see a different side of her. I had one student who had oppositional defiant disorder and spent his days being an abusive menace to everyone. He really was a nightmare and very much put me off teaching in case I ever had another student like him. I am no longer a teacher. Horrible. Abusive. Nasty piece of work. I really want to use stronger language. High school teacher here. This is a long story, but it's a frozen hellscape outside and I've got nothing to do since school was cancelled today and tomorrow. Had a kid placed in my class in the middle of the year. The student had moved from Georgia to Ohio. The first name was not gender specific and I thought for 2 weeks that the student was male. And I was wrong. She did nothing every day but come in and sleep or otherwise appear comatose. And rest and looked like she didn't care about anything. The girl obviously had some real problems, likely including heavy drug use. We have a small but serious boxing community in our school. It produced the captain of the 2004 Olympic boxing team, and somehow this girl got involved. Among the first time I heard her string more than 1 or 2 sentences together was when she was talking with another student about how difficult the training was and that you'd get your ass beat in the ring or left behind on a training run if you stayed up late or got high. I taught summer school that year and this girl took a full load of classes to try to catch up. By this time she was outgoing, involved, and smiling. She took time to attend to her appearance too. But the biggest change was that her eyes were wide open in a way I had never seen before. The next year she had a date for homecoming, got on the honor roll, and graduated on time. She kept with the boxing and loved it. I still don't know why she left Georgia or what her problems were, my best guess is being the victim of some sort of abuse. But when she found her thing she made the biggest turnaround I've ever seen. Terrible student who had a parent threatening to sue the school for everything the kid did wrong if we dared punish them. We said that the student isn't learning, any actions have consequences and soon this person will be 18. The school kept caving because they didn't have the money to defend a lawsuit even if they won. Person is now an adult in jail for life for a rash of horrific and brutal crimes. Wasn't even a month after graduating they started their crime spree. I also had a student beg me to be his mom. He was in kindergarten and didn't want to go home and just pleaded with me to take him home, saying he didn't need a lot and he would be really good. It's one of the few times I couldn't keep it together and turned around and started uncontrollably sobbing in front of other students. He was being removed from his house that evening and CPS had foster care lined up for him. I hope wherever he is okay. I was 21 at the time and living in a 1-bedroom basement apartment, or I might have considered taking him.